Greetings and salutations, high fives and devil horns all around here. It's Friday night, and you know what that means, kids. It is time for the Fortress of Rock. With me, your gracious and humble host, the Maestro, Kevin Crane, episode 134, dropping here on March the 8th of 2024, as always. Glad, ecstatic beyond all belief to have you aboard with me as we discuss, dissect, and analyze the world of rock and roll. What do we always start off with? News of the world. Segment 1 is our tribute to Freddie Mercury and Queen, where we look at the current headlines in the world of rock and roll. Lots and lots of new releases. I won't say new music. I'll qualify it. New releases that have just been announced coming up over the next 3-4 months, let's say, into summer. Now, one of my pet peeves, you guys know, and I have a lot of them, this podcast in many ways is like my therapy session where I get on the couch with you guys and discuss all the problems, the issues, the foibles of the current state of rock and roll. One of my pet peeves has always been, it's not like it was back in the 70s and the 80s. Yes, turning into get off my lawn guy for a moment. Those of us who grew up in the late 70s, the early 80s, still to me the heyday of classic rock. Remember bands like Styx and Foreigner and Van Halen putting out new albums pretty much every year like clockwork. Sometimes they were rushed because the record company was pushing Diver Down from Van Halen. Perfect example of that, but still, despite the fact it was almost 50% cover songs, still turned out to be a classic album. But we don't push anymore. We don't demand anymore. We say, oh, you take your time. You know, it takes you 3, 4, 5, 6 years to put out an album. That's okay. Now, we all know the financial dynamic has changed, where the artists are not getting as much as they used to when it comes to physical sales. Bands back when they were selling albums, cassette tapes, and later on CDs were getting a much more significant portion of the revenue from the sales of their albums. Now it's, we discussed this, the nickel and diming from Spotify and Apple and all the streaming services makes it a little less enticing, let's say, to put together new music. Now, I also, a few months back, went off, I believe it was Dee Snider of Twisted Sister, who whined and cried and moaned and complained. We have to pay for studio time. Isn't this not worth it anymore? You are an artist. You are a creator. So create. I'm sorry. The cliche is starving artist. Artists create even if there is nothing coming back in terms of profit and revenue. It's what they are. It's inherent. It's in their blood, in their souls. They create. So Dee Snider upset me very, very much with those comments. But there are a few great examples in the world of current rock and roll. I've talked about Dave Grohl. Even with the tragic passing of his drummer, his bandmate in Foo Fighters, the one guy who had been with him from the beginning, Taylor Hawkins. Dave Grohl still bounces back with the Foo Fighters and puts out new music. Takes an appropriate level of time off, an appropriate amount of mourning appropriate amount for the grieving process, and then gets right back into it because that's who he is. Miles Kennedy, one of my favorites, lead singer for Alter Bridge and for Slash and the Conspirators, along with his own solo material. He cannot sit still. He'll find a way to put new music out. And we have one of my all-time favorite bands, Collective Soul, Ed Roland and his band, including his brother Dean. They can't sit still. They are always active. They are always moving. They are always creating. That's why I love them so much. Here is the perfect example of a band, of performers wanting to just move forward. Like a shark, they're always moving forward. They're always trying to create, always trying to give us new stuff, because that's what they are supposed to do. Collective Soul has announced, no, not a new album. Well, yes, but not just one new album, a double album. 20 new songs coming out May the 17th from Collective Soul. The album is called Here to Eternity. And I saw this initially and I thought, okay, what is this? Is this a new greatest hits package? Is this a collection of rarities and B-sides? This is a brand new album, double album of 20 songs from Collective Soul. Still waiting for the official release of the first single, which looks to be Mother's Love. They've previewed this song along with one other here recently on one of those cool rock and roll cruises, which of course I will never get to go on because it's too expensive, but I digress. So, in the coming weeks, I'm sure we will be reviewing a lot of new music from Collective Soul. Again, double album of all brand new material, Here to Eternity, out May the 17th. Another new album, looking forward to. Now, I was not a fan of their last new album, but there is a difference here. There is a twist. We're talking about the Doobie Brothers. Last new album they put out was Libertad. We reviewed that here on the Fortress of Rock a few years ago. Not the best album in the world, but the Doobies have announced a new album coming out sometime late spring, probably going to be the summer of 2024. The difference is going to be Michael McDonald, of course, who has been with them on the road, is now going to be an official part of the Doobie Brothers for the new album. First time we have had the four core members of the Doobie Brothers together since 1980. Yes, we're talking over 40 years since the core four of the Doobie Brothers have been together and put together an entire album of new material. So I am very psyched, very geeked to hear what they come up with. Again, initial news, tentative release date, sometime late spring or summer here in 2024. Now, again, you guys know I'm not a fan of greatest hits packages, live albums, in terms of reviewing them, in terms of really spending a lot of time on them. If you're a diehard fan of the performer or the band, get into it. Van Halen puts out anything, I'm in. But we just talked about Collective Soul, new stuff all the time, pushing out new stuff all the time. So to me, cover albums, live albums, kind of sort of a cop-out. Filler. So we've got 2 new releases coming out that fit that bill. First up is Billy Idol. Billy Idol is putting out the 40th anniversary deluxe edition of Rebel Yell. It will be available April the 26th. Depends on what format you like. Digital, double album, double CD. You can grab it, purchase it, own it in whatever format you like. There are 2 tracks on this double LP CD that are intriguing. One unreleased track, Best Way Out of Here, in terms of an original Billy Idol song, and then there is a cover song. Very, very interested by this. Because again, I listened to all sorts of music growing up. And I remember this song, the original version from the band Rose Royce. A little bit of R&B, a little bit of soul here. And Billy Idol covers Rose Royce's hit, Love Don't Live Here Anymore. And I've listened to it actually. Discuss it a little bit more, maybe possibly at the end in our famous 4th segment known as Wrap It Up. But Billy Idol's 40th anniversary deluxe edition of Rebel Yell out April the 26th. And then Slash. And Slash is another one of these performers. I want to give him credit, even though this is a cover song project that we're going to discuss in a minute. Slash is another one who is trying to stay active and stay creative. Whether it's with Guns N' Roses, whether it's with Myles Kennedy and the Conspirators on his own. I give Slash credit. He is trying to stay active and put out content. Now, here, cover album, I don't know. I'm more encouraged and more excited about this one than I would be normally, but still, we're talking a covers album, a tribute album, as it were. Slash has just announced Orgy of the Damned. That sounds very ominous, right? What is Slash hooking up with members of Pantera? No, this is actually a blues cover album coming out May the 17th, where he has got an all-star cast of help coming into the studio, singing these songs, paying tribute to the great blues artists who influenced him, who influenced the people that are coming in. Guests include Billy Gibbons, Paul Rogers, Chris Robinson of the Black Crowes, of course, and Brian Johnson of AC/DC. And that's just a few. Now, I've looked at the track list. We'll probably end up reviewing it once we get to the summer months. But I'm not going gaga, nutsy, cuckoo, crazy about this. You might get a 2 or 3 really good songs here. And again, the leadoff track is out, and we will discuss that again in our classic 4th segment, Wrap It Up. But you can't fill an entire album like this with massive, monumental, heroic, Hall of Fame level guitarist, vocalist friends. So you can tell when you look through the set list, the track listing, some of the songs you kind of go, who is that? Why do I care if he's singing or she's singing or who is that? But again, I've given you the big names. You can go out there and look at the track list for yourself, see what you think of it. Orgy of the Damned from Slash, out May the 17th. Yes, the same day as Collective Soul. Now, interesting in terms of TV, documentaries, rock and roll, stories. I'm always a sucker for a good rock and roll story. Hulu. If you have Hulu, on April the 26th, we will get Thank You Good Night, an official Bon Jovi documentary. Again, debuting exclusively on Hulu April the 26th. I'm not going to lie, I'll probably check it out. I'm not going to guarantee that I'm going to watch the whole thing. I'm not a huge fanatic when it comes to Bon Jovi. They're good, they're okay. I've already told you guys one of the worst concerts I ever saw was a few years ago. And now, of course, stories coming out about how he's struggling with his voice. You know, he got me. He got me. Got my money. And I'm not happy about it. So I have downgraded Bon Jovi on my scale, on my list of the top rock bands of all time because of that. You do not go out and tour if you're not 100% and you can't put out the greatest show you possibly can for the fans, spending 80, 100, 200, 300 bucks for tickets. In this day and age, that is unforgivable. But again, April the 26th on Hulu. Thank you. Good night for all you Bon Jovi fans out there. Little bit of tour news. Not much. Not much. Things have quieted down, which is a little sad. I think this has been a very, very weak setup for 2024 in terms of our summer tour schedule. Maybe this is a transitional year. Maybe I just don't want to go see some of the bands that I've seen 4, 5, 6, 7 times. Maybe they're not out there, and maybe a lot of younger bands are taking over. My favorite concert venue, of course, is Ruoff Music Center, also known as Deer Creek, outside of Indianapolis, and their concert slate this year is not for me. Now, I'm going down there a couple times. Sammy Hagar with Loverboy, of course, and Party Gras 2.0 with Bret Michaels, Lou Gramm, Don Felder, and Dee Snider. But beyond that, not really much that interests or intrigues me. Hootie and the Blowfish with Collective Soul would intrigue me if they didn't want $120 a seat. Very disappointed with that price point for that show. But again, we're filling in the gaps with other bands, smaller venues in the area. We will still end up giving you 6, 7, 8 concert reviews from May through August. But the one tour announcement that just came out this past week, this one would interest me. Now, my friends would not want to go, but Elvis Costello co-headlining with Daryl Hall. 22 North American tour dates just announced, running through June and July here this summer 2024. Have not seen either Elvis Costello or Daryl Hall & Oates. Never seen them. Would like to, but again, I know my friends are not big fans of Hall & Oates or Elvis Costello, so just not ready to pull the trigger on going to a concert by myself. When I was younger, I did. Older, not as easy. Kind of a little bit harder to get the energy going for that. But you guys should check it out. Definitely. If you want to see Elvis Costello, Daryl Hall, tickets on sale, I believe. If not today, should be next Friday. Of course, there will be pre-sales. There will be different ways for you to get a hold of tickets ahead of time. You got to know the tricks. You got to have the right credit card. You got to have the right pre-sale code. You guys know it just like I do. We're well-worn veterans of the rock and roll wars. And then finally, before we get on to a handful of passings, moments of silence in the world of rock and roll, this is something I have not really discussed, talked about since the initial word came down. Of course, Don Henley involved in a lawsuit accusing three men of stealing the original lyrics for a lot of Eagles songs. I believe one of the three men, a former curator of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. But the case this past week was dropped due to a legal technicality where 6,000 pages of evidence were not disclosed by Don Henley and his legal team in time within the legal window. Now, be that as it may, you can take that for what you want. I'm not a fan of Don Henley. I never have been. I never will be. Don Henley is a big reason why we pay exorbitant and extravagant prices for tickets. The Eagles were the first band when they got back together. The Hell Freezes Over tour, they were the first ones that were just shattering the ceiling when it came to ticket prices. Beyond that, I've just heard he's not a nice human being at all. But that's fine. If somebody stole property of his, he is entitled to restitution. He's entitled to justice. A legal technicality screws things up. It stinks. I'm not a lawyer. I only play one on a podcast. I don't know what to tell Don Henley other than get better lawyers. And make sure you follow the rules, dot your I's, cross your T's. The one thing about this, however, the one thing about this legal battle that I don't like, that we should not like, any of us, is how they dragged his name through the mud in other issues that were not even related to the quote-unquote theft of these lyrics. And this is what should scare all of us. Bringing up issues involving a young girl overdosing with Don Henley present, Again, nothing to do whatsoever with the actual case. But of course, we need to establish the credibility of Don Henley. We have to find out if he lies. We have to find out if in his past he has other things that he's done that would show that he could be lying about the theft of these lyrics. This is my problem with the legal system. They will find a way. And usually it's the other way around. Usually a guy like Don Henley would get the benefit of the doubt. But he got raked over the coals. And you guys can do the deep dive on the research. I'm giving you the teaser. But incidents from his past were brought up in court that had nothing to do with the case itself. Basically, again, to drag him through the mud. And again, I am not a fan of Don Henley in any way, shape, or form. He is one of the more despicable human beings in rock and roll. But I have problems with doing this to somebody. One instance, one issue, regardless of if it looked heinous, if it looked very questionable and illegal, has nothing to do with the case at hand. And I guarantee, if we were raked over the coals like this, very few of us would pass muster. Again, I encourage you to look into this. Ultimate Classic Rock has done a great job of covering this trial. I just have doubts about the legal system after hearing what they put Don Henley through. The word extortion has come up throughout this trial. I don't think that term is out of place from what I read. All right, now, unfortunately, as is the case most weeks here on the Fortress of Rock, we've had some passings in the world of music. Steely Dan, touring keyboardist Jim Beard passed away. He's been with Steely Dan again, just on the touring side of things, I believe since 2008. Bob Hale, the man who invented the talk box. Of course, Sweet Emotion by Aerosmith. Bon Jovi, and of course, the most famous use of the talk box, Peter Frampton. Frampton Comes Alive. Thoughts and prayers to the family and friends of Bob Hale, as well as Jim Beard. And finally, this rips my guts out because we just reviewed the brand new album a few weeks ago. Blackberry Smoke drummer Britt Turner passed away. And it kills me. And I'm not trying to be facetious. I hate the use of that term, but it kills me when somebody who's younger than me passes away. And Britt Turner was a year younger than me, fought through his illness, was a contributor throughout the brand new album, Be Right Here. Of course, Blackberry Smoke has had to postpone numerous tour dates due to this. But again, tragic loss in the world of rock and roll. Blackberry Smoke drummer Britt Turner passes away at 57. So that'll do it for News of the World. Next up in Breakdown, Ace Frehley and Mark Knopfler. I'm the Maestro Kevin Crane. I will be right back. Thank you so much for tuning in to the Fortress of Rock podcast with me, the Maestro, Kevin Crane. Of course, that was segment 1, The News of the World, our tribute to Freddie Mercury and Queen, where we look back at the past week in rock and roll and all the news and all the controversies that you deserve to know about. Next up is the heart of the show, the meat and potatoes breakdown, where we are going to review all the new songs, all the new albums, all the new concert tours, the shows that I've seen personally. Stay tuned for that. Of course, we're now available on Spotify, Anchor, Apple, Stitcher, Castbox, Google, Pocket Cast, and Radio Public, wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. Hang out, kids. We'll be right back. All right, everybody, welcome back to the Fortress of Rock here, episode 134, March the 8th, 2024. Try to bring things up a little bit from the unfortunate downer ending in News of the World. New music here in Breakdown, our tribute to Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers. Featured album review of the week is legendary Kiss guitarist, always has been my favorite member of Kiss, even going back to the 70s when they put out their solo albums simultaneously. We all know Ace Frehley's solo album was by far and away, not even close, the best of the four. Now, throughout the years, his solo career has been a little bit hit and miss. But given what has happened with Kiss over the last 40 some years, not surprising that Ace Frehley is still the most prolific and best in terms of talent and ability of the four original members of Kiss. Now, what does that mean? Peter Criss, of course, hasn't done a heck of a lot as a solo artist since he and Ace left Kiss originally. The acrimonious breakup after Dynasty and Unmasked. Of course, they came back into the fold briefly, mostly with touring, not a lot of original new music, a little bit. But Ace has had a sporadic and mildly successful solo career and a handful of great, dare I say, classic songs. Again, with Paul and Gene focusing almost completely on Kiss and Kiss alone, that has left the door open for Ace to be, again, far and away the top solo performer from the ashes of the original lineup. So that leaves us with the brand new album 10,000 Volts from Space Ace, Ace Frehley. And as always, what we will do here is go through this brand new album track by track. So we start off with the title track, the first single, 10,000 Volts. Now, we reviewed this in the past here on the Fortress. I love the song. It is meat and potatoes rock and roll. Nothing fancy. It's catchy. It's an earworm. It does not stretch Ace in terms of his vocals, in terms of having to be poetic and prolific in his lyrics and his songwriting. It is just a straightforward, solid rock and roll song. And just that and that alone makes it the best song on the album. But we're going to see a pattern here that we have talked about over the last year or two. that I'm just tired of. I am just tired of it. And again, I'm going to harken back to the days of the late 70s and the early 80s with the classic bands of Styx and REO Speedwagon and Van Halen and Foreigner, where they put out music more often, and there was barely, if any, clunkers on any of the albums. Now, the pattern we're seeing here with new releases, the first 2 or 3 songs are exceptional, great, and then everything else feels like filler. And yes, unfortunately, 10,000 volts will fall into that category. Now, track 2 is the second single, Walking on the Moon. Critics seem to like this one the best of any song on the album. I will again take the title track far and away above Walking on the Moon. Walking on the Moon to me is a little sludgy, a little slow, plodding in its pace. That being said, it's still not bad. It's better than most of the stuff out there. The one problem I have with this song that we will find throughout the rest of 10,000 volts, and you can even draw in the title track on this if you want to, is Ace Frehley is writing a lot of these songs as if he's 8 years old. And he just met his first crush on the playground in grade school. And he's writing these lyrics on a napkin, and some of the letters, the E's, going backwards, with this bright green crayon as he writes, "I love you so much. You are so pretty. You are awesome and wonderful." Sorry, I hate to be so harsh and cruel. Some might admire the innocence, but as we go through this album, once we get into the third or the fourth or the fifth song with this same sentimentality, it gets to be a little wearying. Now, next to 10,000 volts, track 3, Cosmic Heart, is my next favorite. This to me is Ace Frehley. A little bit heavier. Yes, he's bringing in the space theme. So between the adolescent love lyrics that we get on a lot of this album, and then his obsession with space and conspiracies and his paranoia about the government, that covers everything else. So that's it. Adolescent love, space, paranoia, conspiracies. That's your entire lyric content for all 11 songs outside of the one instrumental on 10,000 volts. So Cosmic Heart, of course, a little bit of the old Space Ace, talking about what's going on out there. And when I say out there, you know what I mean. The universe, the galaxy. But this is the first song where the guitar really stands out. I mean, really stands out. And I will say that. Highlight of this album is the guitar work. Ace Frehley is still capable of shredding. Now, we've talked about Mick Mars here recently. We've talked about Lynch Mob, these bands where the guitarist takes over. If not guitars and vocals like Ace does, but George Lynch, Mick Mars, they form these bands. They are technically the leaders. Now, George Lynch, it's his band. Lynch Mob is his band. You can tell he puts his signature guitar stamp on each and every song, where Mick Mars so far in his first solo effort, we've heard about half the album so far throughout the course of the last 6 or 7 months, reviewed all those songs. He does not have that distinct guitar personality to really set his band apart. Now, Ace Frehley, he decides he needs to sing the songs as well as play guitar. And recently has said things disparaging Paul Stanley, saying Ace is saying he can sing better than Paul Stanley. I can tell you right now, throughout 10,000 volts, Paul Stanley might be old, might need some help with backing tracks. I cannot believe anybody would say Ace Frehley has better vocal stylings than Paul Stanley. That is the weak part of this album, along with the lyrics. The guitar, definite strength. The lyrics, the vocals, definite weaknesses. But again, Cosmic Heart, track 3, we first get the great guitar work from Ace Frehley. Then we move on to more adolescent yearning, pining when it comes to the lyrics. Cherry Medicine. Ugh. Just didn't like it at all. It's awkward. This is where the vocals really go downhill. And going back to the vocals, I have heard in interviews, I have read articles that say that if you're going to see Ace Frehley live, buyer beware. Because as bad as the vocals can be here throughout 10,000 volts, in the studio, live is even worse, even more hit and miss. But Cherry Medicine is the first example where the lyrics are really noticeably bad. Monotone, droning, very little inflection, limited range. And again, the lyrics, adolescent, pedestrian. And then we move on to the same thing with track 5, Back Into My Arms Again. Now, track 6, we kind of get a bump back with the energy level, with the rock and roll. Fighting for Life, one of the better songs on the album. Again, better energy, guitar work is stellar. Basically a down and dirty song about life on the streets. Then we get track 7, Blinded. Oh boy. Oh boy. Oh boy. At least we get some cowbell in there, right? Christopher Walken. I got a fever, and the only prescription is more cowbell. We're blinded by science. We're blinded by fear. Again, very weird, paranoid. Great guitar again, though. And then we go shift back completely opposite the other way with track 8. The cringe-inducing, Constantly Cute. Yes, that is the title of the song. Constantly Cute. Oh! Again, another... I'm glad Ace is in love. Obviously, she's much younger than him. And that's fine. But for the love of God, let's stop with these lyrics. I'm gonna walk up to this girl next to the slide and the swings on the playground and give her a rose that I plucked from the ground over by the baseball field. Oh, it's just cringe-inducing, awkward, and immature stuff. Constantly Cute. Again, who would sing that? It's embarrassing. Literally one of the most embarrassing songs I have ever heard in my life, coming from somebody who I usually like and admire. Then we get to track 9, Life of a Stranger, this really weird melodramatic song about saving someone's life. Now, is this a metaphor for love? Is he saying that his newfound love saved him? And how could you, as a stranger, do this? Give all of yourself to save the life of a stranger? Or is he talking about a literal situation where somebody actually saved a life? I don't know. And the song really isn't engaging enough to make me care. And then track 10, Up in the Sky. Yes, more stuff about UFOs and outer space, paranoia, more, again, paranoid lyrics. You can't trust the news, which I agree with, by the way, and you can't trust the law. Maybe he's onto something here. Maybe at least in Up in the Sky, I can relate a little bit more to the lyrics, even though they're still over the top paranoid. And then closing out the album is track 11, Stratosphere, a decent, solid, unspectacular instrumental. So I probably made 10,000 volts sound a little worse than it really is. It's not horrible. It's not an awful album. It's just, I expected more. It's just underwhelming. And again, the same flaws pop up over and over and over again. The infantile lyrics, the boring song structure, the bad vocals, but again, offset by fantastic guitar work. So I will not recommend 10,000 volts to you kids. It's a near miss, but I just think there's better stuff out there for you to listen to. Now we've got one new song this week to review on top of our album. The second single from Mark Knopfler's upcoming solo album, One Deep River. Second single is Watch Me Gone. Now, I am a huge, monstrous Dire Straits fan. And I have talked, and I will not get into it again. I will just bring it up briefly. I've talked about the group dynamic versus the solo dynamic. And when artists like Mark Knopfler or Sting or Steve Perry go out on their own, leaving behind major groups, bands where everything clicked, everything worked well. I know we don't know what happened behind the scenes, but the strife, the internal strife, the struggles, the conflicts, the personalities, it made for better music. And I'm telling you, 90 times out of 100, the group dynamic makes for better music. And I will say the same thing with Mark Knopfler. I've listened to all of his solo work, and there are times when he's very good, not great, not phenomenal like Dire Straits, but very good. And what we're hearing so far through 2 songs is very good. I'm encouraged in terms of him as a solo artist. Sounds like we're going to get some of his better solo work here from One Deep River. Now, Watch Me Gone, little more downbeat, little more mellow than we got from the first single. That's not a bad thing. Dire Straits had quiet moments. It's all about the song structure and the guitars. and Watch Me Gone, for the most part, works as a mid-tempo Mark Knopfler song. I didn't need the female background vocals. They're a little distracting and unnecessary. If we're gonna go quiet and contemplative with the music, then let's go all the way. If we're gonna go thoughtful, introspective, then we don't need background female singers. We don't need anything. Just go with the spare arrangement, the guitar, quiet drums, a little bit of bass, and we're good. But again, the solo artist will indulge in what they feel is right because nobody else will have the guts to tell them you're wrong. And I think a little bit of the flaw here with Watch Me Gone is that somebody needed to tell Mark Knopfler, you leave that out. If you want to be quiet, be quiet. You want to be contemplative, you want to be introspective, then fine, do it. No distractions. Strip the arrangement down to its bare bones. Keep your guitar, of course, because your guitar is awesome, but strip it down. Go 100%. Don't go 75%. So, Watch Me Gone is fine. I will recommend it. Bare bones recommendation. Bare bones recommendation. If you like Mark Knopfler, if you like Dire Straits, you will probably like Watch Me Gone. It will not bring anybody new into the fold. It won't win anybody else over. But for those of us who like Dire Straits and Mark Knopfler, Watch Me Gone is solid. All right, there you go, kids. Segment 2, breakdown, over and done. And of course, when we get to our famous segment 4, which I keep pimping for some reason this week, try to keep you guys around throughout the entire podcast. We will talk more about next week. Our featured album review and the songs that we'll be looking into doing a deep dive on in episode 135. But episode 134 isn't even close to being over. Doc Brown. Got a lot of rain here outside the Fortress of Rock. So we're going to have to turn the windshield wipers on the Rock and Roll DeLorean as we get it up to 1.21 gigawatts and take it out into the rock and roll time stream for segment 3. I want to go back. Coming up in just 60 seconds. I'm the Maestro, Kevin Crane, and we will be right back here on the Fortress. All right, now that we've looked at the current state of music in our breakdown segment, it is time to climb into the DeLorean and travel back in time to look back at moments in rock and roll history, birthdays, deaths, anniversaries of song and album releases. It is time for I Wanna Go Back, our tribute to Eddie Money. Stay tuned. And as always, we're on Spotify, Anchor, Apple, Stitcher, Castbox, Google, Pocket Cast, and Radio Public, anywhere where you listen to your favorite podcasts. Welcome back, everyone, to the Fortress of Rock. Segment 3 here on March the 8th, 2024 is, of course, I Want to Go Back, our tribute to the late, great Eddie Money as we look back in time and history, anniversaries of classic album releases, birthdays, significant moments in rock and roll history. While Doc Brown is firing up the Rock and Roll DeLorean to 1.21 gigawatts, as we slide into the rock and roll time stream. Of course, this is usually when we take care of some business here on the Fortress of Rock. First up, let's acknowledge our sources for a lot of the great stories that we have, usually in segment 1 and here in segment 3. UltimateClassicRock.com, ThisDayInMusic.com, and of course, the Van Halen News Desk.com. Now, you found us somewhere. One of our platforms is leaving here very, very soon, so some of you out there might have to switch. You can find the Fortress of Rock each and every Friday night, every day, if you want to go back into the archives, and I encourage you, go back into the archives. Of course, my reviews of albums doesn't get old, doesn't age, it's not dated. So definitely go back if you got some time, listen to some of the old episodes. You can listen to the Fortress of Rock on Spotify, Google, Radio Public. Radio Public is the platform leaving us at the end of March. Pocket Cast, Apple, iHeartRadio, Overcast, Amazon Music, Castbox, and Audible. Of course, we have a presence on Facebook. Links to each and every episode can be found on the Fortress of Rock Facebook page, as well as the fun stuff we do each and every weekend. The new Weekend Rock Project has been posted. So what we're doing this week is we are going back to the old school Westerns, the ones that you and I grew up with, the spaghetti Westerns of Clint Eastwood, the Magnificent Seven, Gunfight at the OK Corral. What was one of the typical items, things that you always saw in each and every one of these great Westerns? Good versus evil. The poster, usually outside of the post office, in the small, barely populated town, where the bad guys and the good guys showed up to fight it out. It was the poster, wanted, dead or alive. So this week on the Weekend Rock Project, we want your favorite rock songs with either the word wanted, dead, or alive in the title. And don't even think you can get one over on the Maestro, because I've already posted my first pick, as I do each and every Friday night. Yes, I took the easy way out. You can hate me for it. You can call me a low-down, dirty varmint, and that's fine. I took Bon Jovi's Wanted, Dead or Alive. Triple points. Triple points. Now, there are plenty of other songs out there. Wanted, Dead, Alive. Any combination or just one of those three words in the song title. Go ahead, check out the Facebook page for your Weekend Rock Project. And of course, this coming Sunday afternoon, it is New Music Sunday. We post a brand new video from YouTube, usually a lyric video, because we try to get the newest stuff out there. We don't want to wait 2 or 3 weeks till these bands finally get around to creating an actual decent video with a budget, showing the band, maybe possibly having some sort of narrative. So we'll see. Don't have an idea yet. Don't have a clue yet what song will be featured on the Facebook page this coming Sunday for our New Music Sunday, but you know you want to check it out. Now again, this week we're still doing these awkward breaks between segments. The promos are old, I know. And again, I've explained to you, they served multiple purposes in the past. We initially thought we'd be able to play music in between the segments. Can't do that unless we go exclusively on Spotify. And even that's going away now. Thought that maybe we would put some advertisers in. Didn't really end up wanting to do that either. So that's going away. So very, very soon here, as we transition to a new recording platform, you'll still be able to find us everywhere that I just mentioned, but might sound a little different. Probably going to go with a non-stop format coming up very soon here on the Fortress of Rock. We'll still keep the same 4 segments. We'll just have to do a quick transition between each and every one. And Doc Brown looks at me. He's mad. He liked having his own little personal fiefdom, his island, segment 3, where it was all him and him alone navigating the rock and roll DeLorean. I'm trying to calm him down, trying to give him a raise, although I don't know how I can do that. Give him a 50% raise from 0 to 0. But somehow I'll figure out a way to calm him down, and he will always be here as a presence on the Fortress of Rock. So I want to go back, of course. Again, our tribute to Eddie Money, the late, great Eddie Money. You know how it works, kids. Let's start off with anniversaries. Here on March the 8th. March the 8th, 2016. An overlooked, recent, significant moment in rock history. On this day, March the 8th, 2016, AC/DC was forced to postpone their U.S. tour because lead singer Brian Johnson was told he would go deaf if he continued to tour as a result of serious hearing issues. And we know what happened in the immediate aftermath. We know Axl Rose jumped in, took over lead vocals. We did not think at the time. I didn't. Again, I'm not a doctor. I only play one on a podcast. Doctor, lawyer, lover, thief, whatever you need me to be. But honestly, if you guys remember back then, 2016, we thought AC/DC was done. Brian Johnson was able to get help. And now AC/DC slowly but surely making a comeback. We just talked about recently their performance out on the West Coast at the Power Trip Festival. Now, of course, an overseas tour scheduled. Hopefully, please, you have got to give us one last U.S. tour. Give us all one last shot. Give our kids one last shot at seeing AC/DC live. But back in 2016, 8 years ago, we thought it might all be over. On the same day, March the 8th, 2016, legendary, probably the most legendary record producer of all time, responsible for 23 number 1 hits in the US, and of course, most notably linked to the Beatles, George Martin, passed away on this day in 2016. March the 8th, 1969, the Small Faces split up. Now, the Small Faces split up, and that created two different, yet almost, I would say, equally important bands. The Faces and Humble Pie both were offshoots of this breakup of the Small Faces. They formed as a result. Now, again, a little bit before my time, I will always admit to you guys that I have delved back into the 60s when it comes to music, but I will never claim to be a genius when it comes to the comings and goings of the bands back then. But again, on this day in 1969, the Small Faces split up. And then finally, in our anniversaries, we all know I'm not a Bob Dylan fan. Get over it. But on this day in 1965, March the 8th, Bob Dylan released Subterranean Homesick Blues in the US. It became his first top 40 song. And of course, the promo video for Subterranean Homesick Blues has become iconic. For those of us who weren't around back in 1965, actually the year I was born, so definitely wasn't around for the release of that video, but we all remember In Excess with the late, great Michael Hutchence doing a phenomenal homage. I would say homage. I'm not going to say they copied Bob Dylan with the cue cards. The video is all about the lyrics being on the cue cards. And you're in an alley and you're just rifling through the cue cards. That was the video for Subterranean Homesick Blues. In Excess again, paying tribute back in the 80s to Bob Dylan with the same type of video. So great, underrated, overlooked moment in rock and roll history. So let's move on to birthdays. March the 8th, 1958. He's still out there. I just saw today, I got notice of a concert nearby. I hate to say it, but he is a one-hit wonder. But it's a great one hit. Gary Newman, most well known for his US 1980 hit, Cars. Almost the epitome of new wave. Ironically, along with The Cars. March the 8th, 1957, Clive Burr, drummer for Iron Maiden. Now, he is not with the band. He has not been with the band for a long time, but he was there at the pivotal moments early on from 1979 to 1982 over the first three albums as they transitioned, trying to find their footing, trying to find who they were, bringing in Bruce Dickinson, finally finding their singer who would shoot them off to superstardom, even though they're still unbelievably not in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Clive Burr, early drummer for Iron Maiden, born on this day. Also born on March the 8th, 1948, Mel Galley. Mel Galley played guitar for Whitesnake. Again, one of those guys just like Clive Burr, who was in there for a little taste of the glory years with his band. So Mel Galley was with Whitesnake from 1982 to 1984. Played on Slide It In, that album when they signed with Geffen Records that was just the springboard, getting ready to catapult them to superstardom. And he broke his arm during the tour for Slide It In, suffered nerve damage, could not play the guitar again, and had to bow out of Whitesnake. And then we all know, with the Tawny Katane videos, what happened next. Mel Galley, former guitarist for Whitesnake, born on this day in 1948. 1 year earlier, March the 8th, 1947, Mike Alsop, guitarist for Three Dog Night, was born. And then we've got two left, and they're big ones. March the 8th, 1946, Randy Meisner, one of the most influential, important members of the Eagles. Also played with Poco. And of course, Randy Meisner, most well known for Take It to the Limit. He sang that. Eagles classic, co-wrote it as well. Some would say, and I would not dispute it, one of the greatest songs of all time. Then we get to the final birthday, and this is the one that means the most to me. Again, personal stuff. March the 8th, 1945. And I know I'm going to upset the Beatles fans out there, and that's fine. I acknowledge the Beatles each and every chance I can on this show. We just talked about George Martin. And there's nothing wrong with being the first. Nothing wrong with being the first to do something right. But if that's all we did, was we settled on the first, think about that. We'd all be driving around in Model T Fords, flying in these planes that the Wright brothers flew in. You can improve on the initial greatness. And that's what I've never understood about Beatles fanatics. They don't think you can improve on the Beatles sound. And I will say 100% that is wrong, that is incorrect. But they get mad at me because I kind of pick on one of their peers and I say, they're better. Even though they were a TV manufactured band, forced together because they were probably better as actors than as musicians. And they were. Nobody's saying that the Monkees were anywhere close to the musicians that the Beatles were, although I dare you to tell me that Ringo Starr is a great drummer. The Monkees had songwriters from the outside putting together fantastic songs, whereas the Beatles wrote their own material. I get it. Cuckoo-ca-choo. But the songwriters they brought in were top level. And the Monkees' personalities meshed. Yes, I'm talking about the Monkees. A band that transcended what they were initially supposed to be. A made-for-TV parody of the Beatles. Ended up, in my opinion, putting together better music than the Beatles. And I don't care how many Beatles fans I upset. I can tell you I listen to the Monkees 10 times more than I listen to the Beatles. You take away the first 2 or 3 years of the Beatles, let's put it in perspective with the red versus the blue. We all know as rock and roll fans what the red versus the blue means. The red is the early Beatles era. The blue is when they went nutsy cuckoo on drugs. I'll take the red era And then if you want to argue Red Era Beatles versus Monkees, maybe we can have an argument. Don't even go. Don't even go into the magical mystery tour Yellow Submarine garbage, because you're going to lose. You're going to lose the argument. All of this in a roundabout way. One of the Maestro's infamous tangents gets you to my final birthday here tonight, March the 8th, 1945, the last surviving member of the Monkees, Mickey Dolenz. Last train to Clarksville. Underrated voice. Back in the day. Time has taken its toll on his voice, but very underrated voice. On some of the Monkees' greatest hits, of course, played drums. Played, we can put in air quotes, but still. To me, legendary. Drummer, vocalist for the Monkees, Mickey Dolenz, born on this day in 1945. And that is going to do it for segment 3. I Want to Go Back is done. Parting is such sweet sorrow, but we're not leaving each other yet. The new and improved final segment of the Fortress of Rock is coming up next, including our number 1 album of the week, our top songs of the week, and what we're going to be reviewing in terms of new music in the next month here on the Fortress of Rock. So again, an unnecessary, ridiculous, dated promo break, and we'll be right back in 60 seconds here on the Fortress. Well, we hope you enjoyed our trip back in time, looking back at the anniversaries, the classic moments in rock and roll history. But of course, the DeLorean works both ways. So now we have to move forward. The last segment here, as always, on the Fortress of Rock with me, the Maestro Kevin Crane. Spotify, Anchor, Apple, Stitcher, Castbox, Google, Pocket Casts, Radio Public, wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. It's all about the future. What's coming out here in the next month or two? What songs? What albums? What concert tours? That's why we call it Wrap It Up. Thanks to the fabulous Thunderbirds. Thanks to you for hanging out. Here comes our final segment. All right, everybody, that's going to about do it for the Fortress of Rock here on Friday night, March the 8th, 2024. We've pulled the rock and roll DeLorean into the garage, pulling up the drawbridge over the moat. But you know we're not done yet. It is time for Wrap It Up, segment 4 here, each and every Friday night. Our tribute to the fabulous Thunderbirds. We're going to talk about the future. We've talked about the present. We've talked about the past. Now it's time to look into the crystal ball, into the future. Now, first, though, our new segment we added at the beginning of the year. Hope you like it. It's not going away, so deal with it. Can be redundant, especially when it comes to the number 1 album of the week. Yes, it is time for my tribute to Casey Kasem's America's Top 40 and the Billboard charts, what they used to be back in the day, not what they are now, the garbage, the trash they are now. Number 1 album is, yes, even though it's subpar and I wasn't a big fan of it, I go by what I listened to the most this week. So it is going to be Ace Frehley's 10,000 Volts. That is your number 1 album for the week here on the Fortress of Rock. Now, in terms of songs, I'd like to throw a couple out there, of course, for you. 2 weeks in a row for Kings of Leon and their great new song, Mustang. Of course, the brand new album coming out later this year. Can We Please Have Fun, out May the 10th. Mustang, I just love it. It's quirky, it's weird, it's cool. Love it. And along with Mustang, next week's featured album review will be Judas Priest. We'll get to that in a minute, but one of the new releases off of that album is The Serpent and the King, classic Judas Priest. That, along with Mustang. Those are your songs of the week, the number one songs here on the Fortress of Rock. So, we just mentioned Judas Priest. That is your featured album review for next week, the deluxe edition. We will always give you the most that we can, the best review we can. Judas Priest has decided to put out two different versions of their brand new album, Invincible Shield. It is out now, today, March the 8th, 2024. It will be the featured review next Friday, episode 135. On March the 15th, the deluxe edition, 14 songs, as opposed to the regular edition with 11. So we will go through 14 songs next Friday, the deluxe edition of Judas Priest's Invincible Shield. And then, of course, in mid-May, we will have our review of Judas Priest live in concert. In 2 weeks, the Black Crowes' brand new album, well over a decade in the making, Happiness Bastards, episode 136 on March the 22nd. Still in line after that, first two that I just mentioned, Judas Priest, Black Crowes, Set in Stone. Right now, still looking 3 weeks out at Scott Stapp, lead singer of Creed, and his brand new album, Higher Power. I've liked a lot of what I've heard from that so far. So right now, episode 137, on March the 29th, we're looking at Scott Stapp's Higher Power as our featured album review. And then 4 weeks out, maybe finally, we'll get to Mick Mars of Motley Crue, his first solo album, The Other Side of Mars, episode 138 on April the 5th. Beyond that, we've got the potential for Bruce Dickinson, Mark Knopfler, and of course Pearl Jam. As far as songs go, still a little thin on the songs. Not a lot of new songs coming out. We're still waiting on Collective Soul to release what I'm thinking is going to be Mother's Love, the first single from Here to Eternity, but it's not out yet. Slash, we talked about his blues covers album, Orgy of the Damned, out on May the 17th. The first release from that is out. Brian Johnson of AC/DC on vocals, Steven Tyler of Aerosmith on harmonica for Killing Floor. That'll be coming up here within the next week or two on the Fortress. And then finally, next week, we talked about Billy Idol. We talked about the 40th anniversary edition of Rebel Yell. Hopefully, soon we'll be able to review the unreleased original song, Best Way Out of Here. But for now, we'll take the other quote-unquote new song off of this Rebel Yell 40th anniversary edition, which is that Rose Royce cover, Love Don't Live Here Anymore. I have listened to it. It's intriguing. And Steve Stevens' guitar is awesome. I will give you that teaser for next week as we review Love Don't Live Here Anymore from Billy Idol. next week on the Fortress of Rock. But for now, we're done. We're over. Fini. We have concluded business here on the Fortress of Rock, episode 134 on March the 8th, 2024. As always, thank you so much for listening. Love talking rock and roll with everybody out there. Always drop us a line if you want to on Facebook. We've told you where you can listen to us. Tell your friends, tell your neighbors, tell your loved ones. We keep this clean. We try not to offend as best we can. I'm the Maestro, Kevin Crane. You are, of course, who you are. And in these troubled times, these tough times, remember to love the one you're with. Never stop listening to rock and roll, the greatest music out there. 7 days from now, we will talk more about what's going on in the world of rock and roll. But for now, sayonara, kids. Love you. Peace out.